So we'll start the session now. I think Binay Khan Sinhaji has raised a hand. You can speak if something you want to speak, Binay Khanji. You raised a hand. If something you
Oh,
want to speak, you can speak,
no,
sir.
sir. No, no,
Actually, it's
no,
by
sir.
mistake. Okay.
Oh, by mistake.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Thanks.
So we're just starting now. So once again, very good evening to each one of you. And thank you very much for joining over there. Right. So So today we'll take up, my dear friend, the module 2. We are just carrying on and we'll take up the chapter 11 today. So yesterday we covered ERP environment, computer and cyber forensic. Chapter 10 we have done it. So today we will take up the chapter 11, expert witness dispute resolution, right? So this is a chapter we are going to take up now. Okay? So and we'll cover chapter 12 also today, I think. Both the chapter will be covering today. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let me just share the slide for you, each one of you. You can start now. Yeah. So just share the slide. My slide is visible to you. Kindly confirm. I just share my slides.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So this is what we are going to take up today, my dear friend. Expert witness and dispute resolution. You know, the role of a witness in forensic audit is pretty important, and he plays a very critical role throughout the very clearly till the date of till the time of conviction, you can say, right? So he's a very critical person who is part and parcel of this entire process. So we need to really understand that what kind of a role they plays, and so all this we need to see, and how crucial are they in these people with respect to the forensic audit. So let's see. Like one is, of course, the fraud examiners, whosoever is there, he examine the expert witnesses and he investigate all types of suspicious activity, right? And they will play a very critical role. And whatever like suspicion they discuss, it's a we have in discussion with them and try and like ascertain the fraud which occurs. It can be many kind of a people are there who function now like now as a witness. Now like for example, in one corporate I remember where like certain employees has committed fraud by swindling the money out. Now like it was basically a testing lab. So there we like have a detailed discussion with the culprit also, like you can say the suspected culprit and many other employees also. So they all function as a witness basically, and ultimately like the fraud was ascertained. Now, so and but it's a very tactical discussion one need to hold with these people, because they may not be willing to share the information with you, right? Forthright. So you need to be very now like tactical in able to now like talk to such people so that it doesn't offend them, right? One is very important, and but yet you are able to extract the requisite information for like the which serves our purpose. So it really requires a quite a bit kind of a well prepared, well worked out questionnaire and many other aspect. So similarly, this expert witness, they play a very important role. Like they can be witness can be the people who are maybe the suspected culprit, or maybe the persons may not be the culprit, but still he helps a lot. It can be both ways essentially. So the this what is required. So in this like it says experienced in the forensic accounting fraud examination will extensively write in an evidence document. So what we'll do exactly, like we need to have a great discussion with them, tremendous, and then we evidence that discussion, right? Very clearly that discussion is taken on evidence, right? Whatever their answers are there, they are discussed, and of course Many times they are made to sign, sometimes they don't agree to sign it also, but they are very important part of that evidence. And with respect to embezzlement, appropriation, misappropriation of fraud, and whatever is there. So, like very clearly now, like this we need to see, and we also need to see the various controls which are there, whether they are working, they are laxed basically, how the controls are reducing the risk basically. So this is like and are used, and of course these things are used in all kind of a dispute, whether divorce, valuation, hidden asset, fraud detection. In any way they are used across the board. So, but the it is the expertise of the fraud examiner which is very much required to really be able to examine the witness and to really able to extract, like very clearly bring out the relevant data information without offending the person. Most important, you should not offend a person, right? So giving a comfort level. So like many time I remember we approach the even the people who may be involved with a mind, yes, we have they are there to improve the system of control, and then we have a discussion under that pretext with them. There can be multiple ways to have a initiate a discussion. So the experts basically in the fraud cases, now it can be in any commercial litigation or in any way they are very important. So of course, as I told you, fraud involves some way of a deception, and the documentation, the witness account become a very important part in establishing a fraud basically, right? So and that evidence, as I told you, is used in the court of law also, right? Very clearly. So it become a very critical point, of establishing a fraud, right? So that is something very important. This evidence is there. So what really basically you can say the role qualification of the expert witness. So for for the cases that not settled, accountant can play a very important role, right? As a for the witness basically, they can testify in the court also, because for the financial matter, accountants are in the hub of activity, right? So they can be a very important part of a witness basically, right? And they are aware of the transaction, so they can be used, right, in the testify. Similarly, professionals can be used to testify the financial aspect in the financial statement, so the even the CMAs, other professionals can also be called basically if the reports they because they are aware of the depth of the report, so they can be called to testify the report of the court of law, right? So they are such state of peoples are very important in this case. So witness plays a very critical role in the this such circumstances. So there are two major cases are there, Enron and Health South, where I think this witness plays a very critical role, and in the fraud detection. Like in Enron case, I think you must be aware of that. It was a very major fraud where involving 1.2 billion USD basically, and where essentially the owners now basically went on to reduce the equity, and they followed a very dubious counting practices, right? And hundreds now they kept they open multiples kind of a special purpose entity, and transfer the money basically. So it was, and mostly people were involved in the short term profits and quick and the jump of a stock price. So this way, it misled the investors and about the Enron's overall entire strength basically, by they artificially inflate the earnings, overvaluing the assets, hiding the losses, and tapping the reserves, etc. And that way, to beat the forecast. So Enron case was a very, very perfect example how the financial fraud occurred basically, and that was something eye opener for the I think the auditing community also, even for the regulators also. I think each one of you will be aware of that, where like even the regulators also become much more now vigilant, and beside the auditing community also, right, because they also need to be on the toes basic, they can't think things as granted, but they're the accountants, the professionals, their role as a witness become very very critical, right, in the enron fraud, where all practically all the kind of accounting practices were compromised, and all this earning inflation, everything took place, valuation, everything was basically went for topsy turvy like this, how like this has happened in this case. So going further, like similarly in the this another very famous case, health south case, which is again like a 2.7 billion, right, this is in 2003 it happens, and where accounting expert were used as a witness also, where the CEO now like charged with a fraud, money laundering, corporate reporting, false corporate reporting, obstruction of justice, racketeering, bribery, and many other charges. And there the accounting like accountant, they become the now witness basically, and even for defense and for the prosecution they used their because they were aware of everything, so mostly like this is something very very critical, they are used in such cases as a witness also, right. So like I tell you, give you example, like in one of the bank fraud which we were investigating, doing the forensic audit. There also I remember we approached one or two bankers who by that time has retired, but the case belongs to their period, right? And but ultimately we approached to them, and then their what kind of a practices they follow that time, it was all discussed with them and duly recorded basically, right? That in the loan sanctioning, of course, they were justifying the whatever they have done the best, of course, and we took the thing on the record. But then based on that, we evaluate further also. But that is what those some of the banker who were retired in that particular case, we use them as a witness to really able to see what kind of practices followed that time, what was the procedure followed that time. So all these things were discussed in that way. So we do discuss these things, but it requires a very, very in a very well planned set of questions to be ready and discussion, so that and now very in a clear way. So they play a very critical role in the forensic audit. These set of people, it's the point we were discussing over here. Then goes further. Then comes another aspect of a dispute resolution. In normal course, the dispute arises, which may ultimately lead to the courts, court proceedings, and then resolved. Sometimes there are out of court settlements are there, and so very important part is the dispute arises where like some fraud occur. There's a dispute. Some said it's not a fraud. Some said it's a fraud, and then ultimately we are able to now reach to some end. So dispute is a very important part in this entire ecosystem. So of course when the dispute rises, there is a outcome is a dispute resolution, right? So dispute resolution can be through the arbitration, it can be through the adjudication through the court basically, right? So it's either way you can adopt basically, right? It depends upon the parties involved, like whether what they want to do. So there is a concept evolving now, ADR, alternate dispute resolution, which is quite popular because the cost of dispute resolution through the court is not only time consuming, but it is also a costly affair also, right? Both ways, to the prosecutor and to the defense, in both way it is a time consuming process, and it is also the costly process. So that way it is always advisable to not to resort to the court of law, ultimately to avoid rather. So there's a or ADR is emerging, which goes typically include the neutral evaluation, negotiation, conciliation, mediation, arbitration. So these are various efforts in the ways that are done so that the dispute is resolved, right? So the major forms of ADR are there: mediation, arbitration, rent a judge program, right? Summary jury trial, mini trial. Of course, when I discuss with you, like, these are basically the norms which are internationally followed. So some of them may not be applicable to our country, right? So this is we are understanding how this concept are there internationally about the dispute resolution. So some concept may not be really followed in our country, but overall scenario we should all be aware of that. So one is the mediation. Basically, as I told you, mediation is something first is an informal alternative way to the litigation, like where we now instead of litigation, the mediation is done by some people. They're trained negotiators are there, and who bring opposing party together and attempt to work out a sort of a common ground settlement, basically, right? Where and then ultimately they reject or accept. Of course, not binding from the court point of view, but if the agreement is come in written, then of course become binding. Mediation is the one thing. Another way is arbitration, which is really followed a lot. I think like in the case of Vodafone, the arbitration court in the Singapore ultimately ordered against the government, basically. So arbitration is a very very but normal followed method. But this all thing, this arbitration particularly should be pre-decided, not you decide later on. So once before one once we enter an agreement, then they should be written way out to be written. Okay, we'll go for arbitration, right? So normally it is a practice, not something dispute arose then you go. Normally it is the better is that to have a these things settled way out settled before the agreement before the things now before the agreement even entered, basically, right? This should be part of the agreement. Essentially, we'll go for arbitration in case of a dispute. So here again a arbitrator is appointed, right? And their arbitration courts are there, which based on that they now list the party, and then they give a judgment, essentially. So which is again a fraud quite a bit, basically. Rental court program is something where we choose a retired judge to hear their case, basically. Like this is normally in our country also, if you see retired judge, but this prerogative lies with the government. Many times the government appoint retired judge for certain commission, like forming a commission. This is done, but not normally at an individual level, because they're it is quite expensive process, even the retired judge also. So government can bear it, but normally private is not done. Then we have a summary jury trial, basically, where this again that is not for in our country. You now sort of, you can say, in a fast court, basically. But here summary jury trial, where the judgment, the trial is done in a very summarized way on the key area, and the judgment is pronounced. On mini trial, format varies somewhat, but typically in one high level executive from each side of the dispute plus one neutral advisor. So mini trial, again the terms not really fall in our country, as I told you. Similarly, summary jury trials also, but worldwide they are fall. Rent a judge, again I think I don't call it like in our country, of course, like this also. But government, when they form commission, it's sort of a rent a judge arrangement, you can say, right? They fix a fee, and then the judge is whereas commissions are formed in our country. So mostly the retired judges
Absolutely.
are hired in that cases, right? So there we follow these practices, you
Absolutely.
can say, but otherwise this is not the case over there, right? Yeah. Okay. So this is what about the we just discussed in this case about the various aspect of witness plus the ADR mechanism, right? This we discussed. So this is where we just through with this is a small chapter, chapter 11. We have just through with that. Yeah, if any issue you can ask me, or otherwise we can discuss later on. If something on this chapter you have any discussion, any issue, you can ask me before I go to the chapter like
Sir,
12.
sir,
Yes,
not,
please,
not
please.
exactly on this topic, but SEBI has, we received one message that SEBI is trying to order a forensic audit on all the mutual fund accounts and all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
how relevant, sir? I mean, how we can get those kind of things?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think one is, I think it's a matter of a wonderful thing, good news, and is I think see that we have to of course check with the SEBI what how they are appointing the auditors, but definitely as a CMAs, you can definitely pitch in, right? So I need to one need to find key now. Of course, they have decided, but normally what I believe, like SEBI has a panel of forensic auditor, but I don't know whether they are using that panel for this audit. SEBI already has a panel which was notified, I think, last year also. But you
Okay.
have to check with SEBI basically, are they going to have the people in the panel or somewhere outside? So, and maybe I believe your institute should also held a discussion with the SEBI officials also at that level, and you can also find. You like through some people you must be over there how there, but definitely you're right, like SABI is this, because as I told you, these audits will grow bigger and bigger in the times to come, like SABI, like mutual funds, some other thing. So you must be ready with your like armory and
Mm.
be for the audit. And so as I believe, but I have to you have to check specifically as this question comes about this mutual fund audit, like where to ask check from the SEBI, like how they are going to go ahead. Are they have picking the panel, or they're picking separately from the market the auditor? So that one need to find how they are going ahead. So
Oh, okay, sir. But generally, they will have an empanelment for this purpose. In
see
general,
that
for
they
forensic audits.
already have a panel as per my understanding. SEBI, I think I remember they have notified certain like a forensic auditor, which I think around 15 were the number. If I see, you can
Mhm.
check from the SEBI website also. They must be there around 15. I think forensic auditor they notified last year, I believe, in my opinion.
Okay,
And
sir.
that was, I think, for the first time they formed a panel, because SEBI was not having a panel earlier.
Mhm.
So, but you can check and then see how are they going to with those panel professionals or somebody else. So how they are going, that procedure we need to find. But definitely it's a very good news, I believe, that the scope is increasing and more awareness is there. So I think somewhere you can really expect such work to be like perlocate down to the each one of you also, definitely, yeah. But please
Okay.
find the details, I think, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Anything else? Any other issue about this, or otherwise you wanted to just discuss then anything? Okay. Okay, I think. So then let's go to the next issue. So we'll take up the chapter 12, my dear. Very interesting chapter. Money laundering, financial crime in the cross-border transaction. So we'll take up the topic of money laundering, financial crime in cross-border transaction. That is what we are going to discuss now. And yeah, so my slide is already visible to each one of you. Money laundering, financial crime, and where I think the forensic auditors are very much need to be alert basically, because that is where the major fraud occur, the quantum wise, quite a bit over there, like major amount of fraud occur to this money laundering or the cross border transactions basically. So you should be quite bit aware and discuss this aspect. Very interesting aspects are there about this money laundering. Yeah. So let's go now. So what is the, like in this case, financial crime? The banks, of course, bear the real brunt of the crime, financial crime. The banks or the financial institutions, even individuals also, right? And of course, with the regulator or the FIs introducing new and new strategies to prevent, but the criminal also develop much more sophisticated like techniques with the technology to really be able to evade the scrutiny or the like the offense being noticed basically. So and in that money laundering and even the like financing of terrorism are something very common in the current scenario, right? So this is like you can say the international means like which is there prevalent throughout the world basically, not only in India. And so we need to understand that their modus operandi, and because as an auditor we must know how these things transpire so that we are very well equipped to handle them also. So normally at a financial level, two types of crimes are there. I'm talking bigger crimes: money laundering, terrorism financing, basically. So money laundering, where like the criminals drive the fund from illegal activities, right? Some kind of a like it can be anything. The money which they do not, the transaction which they do not disclose to the government, basically illegal. Like property business is something very normal, right? Or any other like liquor business. So these all many things is there. So and money in a disguised way introduced in the legitimate way to the financial system. So the illegal generated money is brought out in a so-called legal way into the system, that is called money laundering basically, right? So the source of money is illegal, that you must understand, but it is made legal by bringing into the financial system, that is called money laundering basically. So many cases you will see on a daily basis of money laundering cases like in the world essentially nowadays. So there is no dearth of the these cases being reported. Arrests are being made in the world nowadays, in the India rather, which is quite prevalent. So in our country, so money laundering basically, right? Second is the aspect of financial crime we occur, terrorism financing. So where like the terrorist activity are financed, their funds are provided to the individual or the group of terrorists to commit the terrorist act basically, right? So there also like that also comes under this aspect of the financial crime, and they conceal the transfer of funds basically. And within legitimate, the funds are transferred in a legitimate way, but used for the terrorist like activity basically. So that also is a lot of similar to the money laundering basically. So these two facets we have just seen about the financial crime. Now, if you see the detail of money laundering, like is a where like criminal proceeds to disguise their illegal origin. Like the main thing I told in the money laundering, the origin of money is illegal, not legal, right? So you earn the money which is not shown to the government for the tax purposes, for the other things. You hide from the government. That is called illegal origin, right? And the process is very important that way. And then then the criminal divert the money into the legitimate way. So what can be the cases like illegal arms sale, smuggling, activities of organized crime like drug trafficking, prostitution rings, right? They generate these generates a huge proceed, right? Or the this drugs sale, even the drugs, all this sale of drugs basically, right? So this part of that, or even the like this it's produce of drugs basically were done, like narcotics and drugs. So their produce is there mostly in the like Afghanistan, all these hot countries where these plants are basically is planted, and then illegally the drugs are manufactured. Similarly, in the financial, we have a insider trading with the stock chain, which happen bribery, computer fraud schemes are there, right? So these normal things are there. Recently, so the financial, I think yesterday also it came in the news that government has allowed now certain financial apps. Earlier they were banned because government felt that they are fine, but otherwise these financial apps were playing havoc to the like world basically, like promising certain loans and then coercing the person to repay a much more bigger amount. So like in a very illegal ways, so they used to, and which resulted into the even like suicide and other kind of outcomes. So I think many of you must be aware of that, this kind of activity which are happening. So this is a, what is basically the money laundering? Like the basic concept is the source is illegal, source is not legal. The money which is floating is illegal, and they try to be legalize it. Right. So if the money laundering happen in a country, basically, as I told you, it really hit the sort of a the financial nerve of a system, basically, right? Economy of a country and social well-being, because ultimately the government lose revenue, right? You are earning but government lose the revenue, and ultimately it affects the social well-being also. So that I think one can very easily relate. So what are the economic effect of a money laundering? Undermining legitimate private sector, right? Very naturally, like the whatever people who are doing legitimately activity in the private sector, they are undermined, because the legitimate people in the private sector, they pay taxes, they are genuinely working hard, while people in a parallel economy in this, they do not pay the taxes and they earn much more without, like that is where is happening. So they ultimately undermine the legitimate working of a private sector. This is normally the case. The people who are like want to earn legitimately, they also get involved in some sort of activities. Now, of course, it's always a continuous effort of a government also to stop such things. Like I believe GST is one such activity which has really worked, but of course, still many things are wrong happening in the GST also. It is not completely, but far better than the previous, like the this VAT which was there in our country. I think far better GST, right? I hope you must be aware of that also. But still, like GST has a tremendous limitation and subject to misuse quite frequently by the corporates, right? So it is like misuse is quite rampant even in the current scenario, right? Though of course government revenue is going up, but it could have gone up much more if the more vigilant practice are followed by in the departments, right? Anyway, so as I was, the money laundering, as I told you, affect the this legitimate financial market, undermine the integrity of financial market. Like similarly, the financial market, like when the illegal money enters into the financial market also, right? So because the people invest in the bonds, securities, right, in other products basically. So naturally, the integrity of the financial market is also affected, because the money in the market is not from the legalized sources, right? So it really put doubts on the integrity of the financial market. So that is a very worrisome factor, which I think is something is need to be like taken care, right? Loss of control of economic policy, because naturally when this money laundering activity become rampant, whatever economic policy you make, it may not be very productive, right? It may not be very productive. So you can't really have a full control basically, because there is always a parallel economy which is running now, and the money, mostly money flow to the parallel economy, right? And in that case it's not easy, the policies become a sort of a ineffective in that way, right? Loss of revenue, which I discussed with you, that is a major area, right? Government lose a lot, like even government revenue, as I told you, GST is increasing, Even I think yesterday there was a report that the drug taxes has gone up like more than I think 20 30% collections. They're really going up. But I believe still there are huge practices in our country where illegal activities are happening, where like the money floats like anything. Like one area which I think you must be aware, the property business is a major area where still things are happening in our country, and still the things are not controlled. Like so it's almost like a parallel economy in the property business which is there, where like government still not able to control despite like notifying circle rate and many other practices. But still I believe is lot still desired basically. The loss of revenue is the, as I told you, right, is there. Then the reputation risk, right? If the country has wrong practices rampant over there, it hits the reputation of a country internationally, right? The practices are very like not correct. So naturally the overseas, the investors, industries will be wary of coming over there because there is a more of a parallel economy is there. Of course, as I told you, with the lot of current practices and lot of struggle effort by the government in the GST, in the tax, and in the insolvency areas, I believe quite a credible effort have been made by the government, I believe, and it is producing a result tremendously. But still, I think one need to do a lot basically, right? Because now in our country, like this is quite rampant, and it's quite rampant in many other countries also. It's not only in India, quite rampant in the across the board in many other country also, right? So this is like the consequence of money laundering, and of course it has a social cost also, right? Because it leads to drug trafficking, smuggling, other criminal activities where citizens are involved, and it really hit the basic social fabric of the society basically, right? So such practices are rampant. The people get attracted toward that. I think which is like in many states in our country, but in the border states, drug trafficking is quite popular in our country, right? So they're now these are the problem which government tackling basically, but I think they need to like step up the effort. Basically, they are doing it quite, but they need to have put more effort. Yeah. So this is the areas which are there. So it has so money laundering has a social cost also. Basic point is that, right? And naturally, the economic power from market, from the government and citizen, that transfer to the criminals basically. So that is what happens in case of a money laundering. So it has, it's a really, that's why government I think has strengthened the mechanism, and that's why this enforcement directorate in our country is a very powerful body, and the money laundering act in our country is a very strict basically, right? So I think you must be seeing that it's not easy to get out of the clutches of money laundering act, right? And once you are in that, it's not an easy proposition. So naturally in that case is it's a very essentially strict act, and but still the things are happening in our country. It's not easy to get out basically. So these are consequences of money laundering, my dear friend, right? Steps of money laundering, how the money laundering occurs in an economy. So there are three stages are there: placement, layering, integration, right? So what is the placement? Means you bring the illegal money, right? Right, you place the illegal money into the system, right? So that is how it does it. So like you have certain means illegal money which is not, rather you can say unaccounted money. It came from any activity, right? But is not account for. So what is the placement? You bring into the, you place this into the system. It means like you introduced into your business, you can say, or you introduce into the like some kind of a, now like you can say shell company, like this how they does it. First is brought into the shell company basically, right, not directly into the main company, and then come the layering basically, right. So layering mean once you place in a shell company, then you start layering mean you transfer the money from one shell company to the other to third, fourth, and so on from multiple ways, and then ultimately this is called layering basically, right? Second step. So once you place the money into the system over there, right? It can be an individual account or any kind of a shell company, which mostly I think corporate in our country has a shell companies like many people like you must be seeing businessmen have a 30, 40, sometimes 100 shell companies are there, not one, two. So this is the way the corporate operate in our country, and they are used like for such activity quite sparingly, right, and it's not easy to like track them. So that's the activity placement. The layering, they transfer the money from one shell company to the other, and uh, A to B, B to C, and so on, multiple layers, and then ultimately integration. Then the money reaches to the ultimately to the rights where the company where they can be shown as a genuine source. So they integrate into the normal financial system basically, right. So after layering, like through the multiple routes, they are shows like shows basically shown to be the genuine and brought into the business as a legal money basically by layering basically, right. And I hope you understand these things because these are normal financial things and are occurring in the industry in our country, which is not very unusual over there, right. And I believe you also being in the same financial line must be quite conversant, I believe. So like I believe you must be quite conversant with all these areas, so which I'm just discussing right now. And it is a very normal practice in our country, let me tell you. It's a normal practice, right. So it is not something like unusual, you can say, though it is unusual, but not unusual from the businessman point of view or from the professional point of view. Of course, as I told you, these things are now, of course, quite a bit curved basically. It's not easy with government now like controlling, putting control in a, from multiple ways. Even the current budget like has also put introduced many new provision in the income tax where these things are sought to be curved basically, right. But not comprehensively, right? Not comprehensively. Like it is still happening in our country. But so this is the issue one need to understand about this money laundering. So these are three stages are there, my dear friend, which I want to discuss to placement, layering, integration, right? So this is how it happens, and like it is well, it is taken care, and it is in the like economy, and this how it is done basically. Okay. So this is just 1 minute. Yeah. So this is what we need to understand, my dear friend, about these activities. And going further now, what are the defenses which come in money laundering basically? Because it's a very complicated functioning of money laundering, basically, you can understand. And so, like normally, the what came as a defense of the money laundering, you can say, is a lack of evidence. One is number one. So, the evidence to establish money laundering is not an easy task. That is the basic like problem in the money laundering. Of course, it's the prosecutor who has the responsibility to establish, but to really establish a trail of money laundering is a quite a big task. Like even in like I tell you, like when we do forensic audit, In our case also, like when we have to establish a trail, how the even the loan gets sanctioned, and then basically transfer to the X account from X to Y, Y to Z, and so on. To get a trail and establish it is not an easy task, right? So even in that case also. So similar in the money laundering also, the one major problem comes with sort of a, like basically now like sort of a defense you can say is lack of evidence. Second, like no intent. More many times the people get involved into the money laundering unknowingly, basically, right? So they may not have intention. Like you can see the many frauds in the banking industry which happen where corporates are involved, but banker also are get implicated, rightly or wrongly, whatever is the reason. So they, of course, like I saw in many cases my bankers, like when he says, when I talk to the bankers, like when like in all the many forensic audit, so they try to do the work to the best of their ability, right? I believe, right? And with a complete dedication. But still, there are gaps remain. There are problems are there. So though they may not have intention, right? But in that still, since the fraud has occurred and they were part of the system, they also become like unknowingly become participant in money laundering. Basically, this happens. And third is the duress. Many times people get involved because they are forced to do that. Right? So it happened many times. Like the fraud occurs, fraudster now like use the other person and they force the other person is forced to now like join, and by one or the other reason, and they are basically now like it's a like it's called a duress basically, right? So it happened many times. The companies also like some unscrupulous employee, they entice either or they force other and their colleagues into this entire, like you can say, the quagmire, and where like they also become part of that. So say sort of you can say the, now you can say duress, they're stressed into that, they're forced into that. So these are the some aspect of the money laundering which also we need to be like aware of that, and which need to be taken care, like in this case, right? So that is something very critical. Going further, my dear friend, like now in the money laundering, another very important aspect we need to see, trade based money laundering process, TBML, or cross border transaction, which is quite rampant. How money laundering happen across the border? One is within the country, you can say, right? And another is the like across the border, which is where the scale is also very very high, right? So it involves in the export import of goods, right? And the exploitation of a variety of cross border financial instruments that also you now like exploit the many kind of financial instruments. You use export import transactions to do this money laundering basically. So they are called trade based money laundering methods. So let's, what is over invoicing? Very very rampant basically, right? Each has its own meaning. So like over invoicing, you send the goods of X value, but you show the X plus 1 value. Probably you want it to like increase the cost to the importer so that he can like show less profit. That can be one reason, right? To do the over invoicing, maybe the one reason, right? That is the another can be the case. Now it can be used in export import both. So you like import a goods which is over invoiced, right? So ultimately the cost will be higher to you, and in that case you now like essentially now like able to curb your profits, and now like that is where like you does it, and this difference money is transferred basically, because you have to pay the money also. So, or you don't pay the money, you just write it off basically. Whatever practice can be followed, the difference amount. So this is one way of the trade based money laundering. Under invoicing, again very quite a bit happens. This is where this anti dumping laws come in the country many times, you must be seen. Means basically you sell your goods at a lower price to really cut across the domestic market of the importing country quite a bit. This is why there is anti-dumping laws are we discussed many times at the, you must have seen the WTO forum. These are normal things are there. Many country they are like this. Why there is a rare talk on the anti-dumping, being the anti-dumping laws, where they should not dump their product in the other country and thus hitting their market. So this is done under invoicing. You sell the goods at a very lower price, right? So that you can just destroy the domestic market, and this happens quite a bit also. Or you wanted to bypass their import duty structure basically, that also happen. The duties are quite high put by the government, by any country. You invoice, sell the same good at a very lower price, so that way you can just now like have them enter the system. And naturally, when the goods are sold at a under invoice, the normal price has to be paid. The normal price, the difference will go to the hawala transaction, because price has to be paid basically. So this is what happens basically at international level. This activity is quite rampant throughout the world basically, right? Then we have a multiple invoicing, like invoices are raised in a multiple way, and many times the invoices are going, but the good do not transfer, right? Only invoices happen. There is no transfer of a goods. In some it goes, some it doesn't go. So that way again it results into the your transfer of certain money, like from one jurisdiction to other jurisdiction. Then over under shipment, again it's almost similar with the cases. You send the either goods beyond the invoice value, or you send the good less than the invoice amount. So the in the invoice something more is there, like that is the, you can say the, you can or sometime the in the invoice the goods are different from the what shipped. It can be more, it can be like lesser. So over under shipment, in that again involved in the over shipment, you are illegally transferring the goods to the other jurisdiction, right? While in invoice the goods are lesser. It can be under shipment also, right? It means you are overbilling, right? Goods are not being sold basically, but you are showing them to be sold. That can be done to curb the, like the some you can say the profit basically. You are selling them like the goods are not being sold, or you are selling the goods like lesser good, the good which are under shipped, to that extent you generate the illegal money, right? Because you sell them illegally, because so that is how it happens. So there are multiple practices are there, my dear friend. Not one sort of a trend is there, right? And then we have a quality misrepresentation. You sell certain goods, and then you basically now essentially use that, now like you misrepresent the quality, use goods of X quality, but you sell them by showing the different quality. It can be lesser quality, poor quality. So naturally it affects the pricing, right? But actually you're showing them why is the other quality. So these are the means are there. So money laundering is a very, very rampant area in the current scenario, which is quite a bit basically, right? Which happens. So we need to be well taken care of this factor. So I think what we can do is almost now 1 hour. So maybe you can all take a break because it's a longer session, and then we can continue further. Or if you have some question till this point, of course, we still to come to the money laundering chapter. Still, we have to take a few more issues. I can discuss with you over here before we go for a formal break. Any kind of a discussion you wanted to have till this point, because many issues we discuss the money laundering. So I can just handle anything offhand thing which are there, some queries or some issues you want to share, some query you want to discuss. So you can just share over there, and then can take a formal break, and then we can rejoin. Yes, either way is okay, whatever you feel. So please feel comfortable if you have some kind of a question, because I feel today questions were lacking. There's no question from any of you. So because I really want, because many times you are all participating, but today I don't saw any questions in the chat box also, or otherwise also. Yeah, if something is there, please feel free. You can share your experience. You can ask question also, because you all have a wealth of experience. Yes, please.
Sir, is there any ceiling limit for money laundering?
For money laundering, no. So the Money Laundering Act provides, I think we discussed earlier in the, if you remember, that there is a report, like there's a CTR report goes, cash
Okay.
transaction report by the banker, which says if in your saving account or 10 lakh of a cash get deposited, right? Then it will go the report to the, like it's called FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit of a Ministry of Finance. The report goes to the RBI to the FIU. Now FIU the will see that whether it's a money laundering or not, right? They will see. So, but the report goes to the KC where the cash deposit is of a 10 lakhs and above. Right? There's a report in the banking industry which goes, I think, which we discussed, I think, earlier in some previous sessions also. So, but there is a norm by the banking. There's no norm in the Money Laundering Act, please understand. The Money Laundering Act, there's no such limit. But this is the limit which RBI themselves has prescribed, right? So the money laundering can be of even like small amount also. There's no time like the amount prescribed as per the law. But in normal course, which I think you must have seen, normally I believe like the government do not investigate the small cases of a, like I can say 10, 20 or even 1, 2 crore, I think. Like 10, 20 lakhs, I think they don't investigate into that, right? But there is no limit basically in that cases, right? In for the money laundering, essentially. That is what I believe. Yeah. Yes. Anybody else?
Sir, what about black money transaction in real estate?
Yeah, so they also are in the eyes of government, black money transaction, and government try to capture. There is a circle rate concept has come in our country across the board. You can't register the property below the circle rate. Even income tax act has also provided about that. Like if there's a difference in the sale value and the register value is more than 10%, then the income tax officer can take the higher value for capital gains, and this what I think laws has there in our country. But still it is happening basically, right? In this ways, right? So and but government, we need a evidence. That's why we discussed there's a evidence is a problem. So there need to be evidence. Unless there's evidence, you can't do anything in the money laundering basically, even the court of law also. That is why, like ED, many times you will see investigate a lot. So many times they have a, like many times they call for deposition, and then after multiple deposition they arrest a person, because not easy to for them, because in every time the court will ask for a evidence. So evidence is not very easy. Like in property transaction, is the biggest problem. The evidence is not there. I buy a property of a 1 crore. I actually pay 75 lakhs, 25 lakhs. I just pay through the cash, no evidence. Now, where do you get evidence? Nowhere. So it's not easy to get like in the property business. That is why this is a major area of this black money in our country. And but I believe with the many practices the government is adopting, like so it is happening like in this country, like even income tax, in the income tax department, income tax officer has also like the power, you must be aware, where they, if they feel they can independently revalue a asset and just see if something wrong and then take action. They have also the like power, independent income tax act also. So of course these are
So
the areas, like you are right, absolutely, but
if
government is
if
trying.
if
Yes, sir.
if no evidence,
Yeah,
how the forensic auditor will helpful
yeah, that
to
is where
establish
like,
the evidence?
see, that is where like the forensic auditor has also to now work on the evidence. I told you that's why we go for the witness basically. We discuss the
Mhm.
witness also and talk to them also. We have a financial records also are there, right? So the forensic auditor now like has many things, like my dear friend, right? So now it is so the if the fraud occurs, like see, our job is the fraud occurs, then we our roles come, and when a fraud occur, there is 100% way you can find evidences, the transactions and everything, like many things
Mhm.
like are there, witnesses there. Like in my case, I find I think in my all multiple forensic audit, very few case we went for a witness. 99% case we are able to have a evidence, because what happened, please understand, our role is mostly of a financial transactions which already has occurred, right? My and your role is to see they are diverted out of the system, they are siphoned out, so they are in the system. I have to find how they go out. So for us, I don't think so evidence is a problem. So now in a money laundering case is of a very bigger scale, but we are understanding, right? That is the government do investigation. But of course, forensic auditor are also hired in that cases also. But normally, in the course of the transaction which we encounter, where the transaction has occurred through the financial system, and in that case, our and my job is to very clearly see now, like how really now, like now things have now established to go out. Yes, so this is what happened. Yeah, Pradeep Kumar ji said, think like a criminal mind. That also is another way that like you can think and to establish that. I think there is also very interesting observation, and very frankly, we adopt this approach many times during the audit. Yes, yes, good take. Yes, yes, sir. I hope it answered the point of the. So forensic audit, don't worry, they have enough evidence, as per my understanding.
Thank
So I
you,
like
sir.
in my all the forensic audit never find a dearth of evidence, my dear friend. Even from the web, from the other sources, the thousand evidences are there. Don't worry about that.
Sir, any specific checklist or controls in this regard from SEBI or any other regulatory authority, sir, that needs to be followed for this anti-money laundering? From at least from director's point of view or independent director's point of view, to ensure that, or as the audit committee to ensure that this money laundering process has been taken care of, at least as a, I mean, as a control process or as a checklist.
Hmm. But I think those specific checklists cannot be like freezed basically. Mostly, like I feel in the audit committees or the independent director, they rely on the assurances of the external auditor basically, right?
Mhm.
Or the forensic auditor basically. Like if such thing occurred, basically they go into the forensic audit report, or they, if they suspect something, they go or for the investigation, because it's a very specialized job. I don't think so any checklist will be suffice.
But as
On,
such, for
yeah.
AML, there is no framework, sir.
See, for if EML, there is no framework here, right? But it is the like the kind of a you can say there are practices which are there, like you can see there are accounting standards are there in our country. One is called related party transactions, right, which is a
Yeah.
tremendously, I think, vast. This, I think, is accounting standard 26, if I'm was giving the number right. But there's a very powerful standard, the related party concept. Such a standard is there which auditor need to see their compliance, and is somehow related to this AML, basically directly indirectly you can say, right, where how do you do the transaction and whether the auditor need to disclose. So that is the one very clear powerful standard which is there, which are used by the auditors also, and they can't avoid it essentially, though there is no framework. So but that give a very direct disclosures that this whether the related party transaction has happened in the company, and they give a very clear disclosure. And then, but of course, once the disclosure is done, if something suspected, then the independent director can go for the detailed investigation, right? But I feel it's not very easy to fizzle out to specify any sort of a checklist, basically, right? Like or like you can see there is a mostly there is a fraud mechanism specified in many organization. Now, like is there where like or there is a whistleblower mechanism is there, like where any malpractice happening in in the organization, the through the whistleblower mechanism these things are highlighted basically. And then but the investigation need to be done. So I believe this as far as this independent directors are concerned, or this audit committee, they need to see, one is their auditors are independent very clearly. I
Oh,
think the independence of auditor is also many times under question. So what is important, the independence of auditor and the quality of the audit also, right? So
yeah.
what is something very important? Many times the quality auditor may be independent, but the quality may be missing, right? They need to see the really the quality of the audit. And then the, I believe another point which I feel is the whistleblower mechanism should be strengthened and be very meticulously followed, basically, right? This
Yeah.
what I believe. These are
This,
the ways,
there,
and
there
of course strong internal control mechanism,
there
very
is a
powerful.
SEBI guideline, sir. Maybe I'm just putting this for reference. If there is something which we need to take from this, it's kind of guideline I got from SEBI.
Quite possible, I think.
Just,
I think we have to go through these things. SEBI guideline on the anti-money laundering, I think. So you are right. So one can always go through these detailed guidelines. Good, you have put it, I think. So and just see what kind of a like control they prescribe. This is basically, I think they have like given to all the mutual fund, basically, because mutual fund
mm,
has like now you can say the this detailed way they are like prone to the money entering into the mutual fund, black money, basically, right? So but I think I just went to this circular. Yes, it's quite a long circular, 40-page circular is there, which is they give it basically. And so one can always go through what kind of a guidelines are there, what kind of a control they prescribe. I think you are absolutely right, and it can be discussed and studied. I think there is absolutely, you are perfectly right, I think, yes. So that can be like used, and that can be like really be studied, I believe. So there's I will also go through this guideline. And so of course, like there are like are being followed in our country. And that is why maybe I think, because mutual fund, you are, I totally agree with you, are a area which is quite prone to the like illegal money being entering the system. So I think, so good, I think this Mr. Verma ji, after you have put it, I think so we should all go through this.
Sir, please unmute yourself.
Mistake at end. Yeah, anything else you wanted to share something? That's good, I think our friend Mr. Verma has put this important guideline we all should go through. like, and something like to really, yes. Anything else?
Sir,
So the main function of the forensic auditor is to establish the how the money is siphoned in the from the system, correct?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. How the money has been siphoned out of the system, like the legal money has been made illegally, has been siphoned out illegally, basically, right? So this mostly the forensic audit like goes across this very clearly. This is the central theme is around that, basically, like in the bank fraud, even the corporate also, even in the anywhere also, right? Of course, the government investigate from the money laundering point of view. We don't, but we don't, basically. Our focus is whether fraud has occurred or not, because money laundering, like implication, implementation is the job of the government, not the job of you and me, basically. But we need to understand the implication, because it's part of the fraud mechanism, basically, that you are right there. But it's the government which is empowered to implement the law, right? Right. So I think somebody, how legal money brought into the system along with the siphoned out. Yeah. So see that in a money laundering, illegal money enter the system, right? But mostly the forensic audit which we do, this is the how the legal money which is there has gone out of the system and used for the purpose for which it was not designated, right? So like somebody took a loan for some purpose, for a business, but siphoning out to use for the personal purposes. That is what it happened. So our job is to, that is where the forensic audit focus, and there is a fraud, basically, essentially, right? So it is that we must understand, right? So I hope this is clear on this point. Yeah. Anybody else?
sir,
Yes, sir, please.
sir. So far, my understanding goes. I have read the Money Laundering Act, Anti-Money
Yeah.
Money Laundering Act.
Yeah.
The burden of proof here is on the accused.
Hmm.
Only in this act. In every other act, be it IPC or civil law, the burden of proof is on the part of the prosecution. Prosecution has to prove that he has done like this. But only in the Anti-Money Laundering Act, the burden of proof is on the accused. Section 24 of the Act. It will be presumed whoever is uh, found with evidence of uh, this thing, your money or property or uh, other things acquired illegally, yeah, and there was attempt to legalize it, and he is enjoying. These three things must be there. Illegal acquisition of something with through criminally, by criminal act. Number
Yeah.
two, possession, and number three, enjoyment of this, of that. These three if are there, then it will be considered as money laundering. And if
Mhm.
the charge is there of money laundering, then the court will presume that the accused is it is correct. The charge is correct, unless the accused can prove otherwise. And this is the I think, sir, this is the exceptional nature of this act.
Yeah, of course, now, Mr. Basu, you're right. But we have to also extend our understanding, which I believe is that even the prosecutor has to have a proof to put the allegation, right?
Yes,
Then
sir.
the burden is on the
Accused.
accused to deny that.
Yes, sir.
But the
Yes.
prosecutor cannot put the case without having a proof. That's why if we have seen many cases in our country, so many like the deposition, so many statements are recorded by the ED, and then the person is arrested later on, and then the case starts. It's not easy because case can fall through. So the first they also need to have a proof of the money trail being siphoned out, right? How the illegal the source, because for them First establish the source is illegal.
Illegal, right?
I think the biggest problem in the is there. They have to establish the source is illegal. They cannot file a charge sheet without that source, without
Yes, sir.
that establishment. And then,
Yes.
of course, the burden comes on the criminal, the
Accused.
alleged accused, to
Mm.
deny that. That, of course, is the
Right.
matter. So, and the proof, the first, the person, the prosecutor also need to have a clear proof, otherwise they can't like go ahead simply best. Like it happens so that we see in many cases, the case falls through. Like that is why I
That
think
the
there was a
Chidambaram case, sir.
huh?
P. Chidambaram and
Yeah, I
Chidambaram
think
case.
that is why if you see there is a normal allegation, normal in the word, the conviction rate in the ED cases is less than 5%
Yes,
conviction
sir.
case, because ultimately the case falls through, right? The conviction rate in our country is less than 5% in the this money laundering cases. You can't convict a person very easily. It's very difficult to establish. So even if you have a first to find a trail very difficult, then to authenticate in the court is far more difficult. So that is why, but anyways, like part of a legal process. Yeah, you're right, Mr. Basu, but the person has to have a proof, then only can prosecute. Yeah.
And sir, here it will be so difficult for getting the proof. That's why I think, sir, for the forensic auditors,
Hmm.
it will be quite sufficient that if the guidelines of income tax or FATF, whatever are there, if it is maintained, if it is complied with,
Hmm.
that is to be ensured by the forensic auditors,
Yeah.
whether there was any violation of those guidelines
Yeah. Yeah.
on the part of the company or bank or
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, you're right, absolutely. That is the role of the auditors very clearly. That is why, you're right, absolutely. The
We will not get any proof, sir. We will not get any proof for of and money laundering. A
no,
forensic
no,
auditor cannot have any proof.
that is see, that is what I was telling earlier. Our see that this is the government job. Money
Yes,
laundering is
it
a
is not our
area
job, sir.
where forensic auditors can be hired for some specific purposes. Let me tell you, right? Within that, I
Yes,
give a
sir.
very big example without naming, because the example I was not very quoting. But I give you example without naming. Like we were hired by a agency where we were told to investigate a case of a ill-gotten money of a very senior government officer. So and we did that. So it was a very clear, because it's of a money laundering. But we were given a very specific task within that. I can't
That
name
is
you the agency because it's very
SFIU or
confidential.
like that can
Huh?
give you that.
Huh?
SFIU or ED can
Yeah,
appoint you.
there are many, like many agencies are there. So they like since we are on the panel, but they gave us very specific, because they were investigating. The officer was a very senior government officer, very renowned one, and then they were investigating. So they give us a specific task of those financial transactions of that person to
Yes,
ascertain. So
yes,
overall,
sir.
they are doing money laundering, but within that they give us specific task. So the forensic auditor, please understand, our my domain is to see the how the money has been laundered out, right? Very
Yes,
clearly.
not
So there is
in.
always a money you will find. Laundering out we have to establish. So for forensic auditor, there is never a problem of a finding evidence. Like let me tell you, like if you use the basic skill set, never a problem. Now, at a court level, in the over money laundering, there are multiple issues that we are not discussing over here. But I am talking as a forensic auditor to each one of you. Like there is no problem of finding a evidence, because the money we already have the no, there is a money now. How it has gone out illegally? I think that one you have to find a trail, which is not very difficult. So you need to go to the document depth of documentation. So that is so for us, as far as evidence is concerned, like
But
it is
here money is coming, sir. Here money is coming in.
which
The
where which case.
money laundering. In the case of money laundering, money is coming in, sir.
See, this what I'm telling you. In money laundering, the money comes also and money goes out also. Please understand, right? It's both way happen. Like some businessmen bring illegal money into the business, and then it become a genuine business, genuinely, and then the money is misused, goes out of the system, like essentially. And so what our focus, what I'm telling you is, please understand, is which is money in the business, which can be businessman money, it can be money from the bank basically, and how that money goes out,
Goes out,
right?
right?
That how that money goes, like money I obtained from the bank, took a loan, and how the money goes out, that is a fraud basically. So our
Yes, sir.
job is the fraud detection, not money laundering. We must understand money
Right.
laundering is a much more wider term.
Wide.
Their forensic auditors are not really, has not ventured basically, are not supposed, the government agencies which are working on that. Our job is very specific. It can be with the money laundering also, but otherwise it's a fraud detection where the legal money in the business is there, like money of the, yeah, I take a money, it can be money from the other shareholders I siphoned out illegally. It can be money from the banker I siphoned out. It can be money from the creditor I siphoned out. It can be loans from the public I siphoned out. It can be anything basically. Like all these are the fraudulent means. But money laundering is much a wider term, which I think now where the
Yes.
government use the power. So let's be
Yes,
very
sir.
distinguished on these two terms and be very clear where we need to stand. Okay?
Thank you, sir. Sir, after the break, if
Yeah.
you can explain this sale company concept, sir,
Shell company
for
concept.
our
Okay, okay.
after the break, sir, for our for understanding purpose, sir.
Okay. Chalo,
We
we'll take a
heard it.
5 minute break, I think. It's a
Yes,
quite
sir.
a long
Yes.
session.
Thank
So
you,
I'll
sir. Thank
explain
you.
to you. If anything else also you can put in chat box, but I'll explain the shell company concept which our friend Basuji asked. And if anything, please in chat
Thank you.
box. I'll
Thank you,
take
sir.
a
Thank you.
break. Please. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So let's begin the session now. Yeah. So I hope you are all there. So there was a one point I think our friend Mr. Basu was asked about the shell company, which I think many of you may be aware of also there. See, normally this is the practice used in the corporate world, where they create certain company. The shell company is a company which is not a real company basically, right? Which is essentially, when it's a real company which is not doing the business for which it is proposed to do it. Like every company has certain like activity which is proposed in the memorandum, whatever. So the shell company actually do not do such activity, whatever they are proposed. So they are only on a paper, right? They exist and they are used for basically transferring the money from one account to other account, right? So like for example, I a businessman has a company called XYZ which is doing their normal trading business, fine, their money comes. Now they have a illegal money. Like in that case, they don't like straightway enter the money into the XYZ. So they first enter the shell company, like maybe the A company, and the in the shell company it is introduced maybe as a equity or as a loan, which is not tracked basically, because the sometime even the documents are not filed or the entire bank's account not disclosed. Then from A, the money got transferred to B and so on, various other companies. So there are many companies are there they create which are not in doing the business for which they are formed. They are only used to transfer the money from one to other source, right? So mostly they do the loan transactions, right? So and or even sometime like these firms show some kind of a fictitious sales also, like even this company. And so some fictitious sale wave, it means where actually there is no goods are moved basically, but there is a turnover is there, you show the money is being there so that you can this is where to just to like misguide the government that they are doing some business, so that also they built up some transaction, but along with that they have this loan transaction also keep happening. So this is how these companies are created and the money basically get transferred to from one to other company, and then ultimately money enters into this legal company XYZ later on. So if some government want to investigate the source of money, they need to have go to the web of shell companies. So maybe the like from A to B, B to C. So ultimately it become very difficult for them to establish the source in that case, because like in a money laundering you need a exact from where the money has come. If you show money has come from B company, B shows C company, C shows D company. Now that doesn't become the money laundering. That become a genuine source ki money has come. Ultimately, it has to be shown from where the source, like from individual, from some illegally money has been entered. So government want that basically. So that is where like how the people can very conveniently make the system a mockery essentially, and where become very difficult to establish the original source of money. And that is why since they have a web of company, it make the government a task very difficult to ultimately reach to the ultimate source, right? So that is how these shell companies are created for this purpose, which are only used to for the loan giving and loan taking activities, or for running the sort of a fictitious sale where there is no movement of goods basically, so that they show the money is rotating, and under the guise of that money rotation or purchase sale, so the illegal money transferred to the other things also. So this is a quite a rampant practice basically, in the government, in the private circle basically, which always happens. Similarly, they open the trust also, multiple ways. So I hope it is clear to our friend Mr. Basu. This the shell company which our friend has
Yes, sir. Thank
like
you, sir. Thank you.
yeah. So it is quite normal in our country particularly. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to further to a slide now. So where we need to go on for this money laundering topic I was discussing. Yes. So I'm just shared my slide. I think I hope it is visible to each one of you. So after that comes a very important body, which I think some of you touched also, FATF. I think many of you must have listened. Financial Action Task Force. It's a very, very major international body, and I think in the newspaper also you must have listened. So which is there quite actively involved in tracking the this kind of illegal money basically. So what FATF does basically, to just put it, is basically is a global money laundering and terrorist financing watchdog. It's a very, very major watchdog, and it sets the international standard that aim to prevent illegal activity and harm any cause to the society. And you must have seen now, you if in a bank now, if you open a bank account in any bank, there are norms prescribed by the FATF, right? Certain KYC norms, certain money laundering norm. You have to give a declaration. So it is basically based on the guideline by the FATF. So it's a very major body basically, and it also carries out research into the evolving method trends to assist countries in identifying, assessing, and understanding their money laundering and terrorist financing activity. And once risks are properly understood, the country are able to implement more effective measure to mitigate risk. So, the control in the bank account, you see, there is a now especially FATF. Now declaration has to be given, you are resident of this country, and multiple declaration you must be seen while opening a bank account in our country. So it's basically by the FATF they are prescribed, so that this is the how they can control the terrorist funding and the financing and the money laundering. So FATF, is quite active now, and in the it also goes to the sort of environmental crime also, where you can see the illegal activity of illegal logging, illegal wildfire trade, and the waste trafficking. So even the environmental crimes also it investigate, and then advise the country the control measures basically. Then even the migrant smuggling is a global issue which handle it basically. So multiple things they handle, where millions of migrants seek to escape regional conflict and political instability, persecution, and the poverty in such better future, and they can risk their lives at the hands of migrant smuggler. So this now like basically those millions of the migrants, they are used for smuggling activities by the this unscrupulous element. So this also is tracked basically. So this is a so FATF is a very powerful force basically, which is there for the money laundering internationally and in our country also, like they are give regular advisory. So what have like basically like the FATF prescribe the various cross-border transaction which they seek are the like the red flags, are sort of red flags are there. One is significant discrepancy between the invoices and the description of goods on the official document. This is the one thing FATF find, and they suggest the countermeasures. Like in many cases, the discrepancy between the invoices and the description of goods, like what goods they are selling, what invoices are there different. Shipment with unusual traffic of goods handled by the particular importer. Sometimes the a particular importer exporter, the handling is quite high, unusual. So maybe the person is may not be maybe handling something, doing something illegal also. Then shipments are routed through a number of nations or multiple unconnected subsidiary without a concrete reason. So that way to avoid the being tracked, they are routed through more than one nation and even to the multiple like subsidiary which seems to be unconnected to avoid not being tracked basically. Payment methods are inconsistent with the level of risk presented by the transaction. Sometimes they like now, payments are in a very risky way, so which are normally like not in consistency with the which the normal transaction which they promised. Shipment goes typically at a high risk of money laundering. So that is also the transport of good entering or leaving a country that are considered to be high risk, right? So where some countries are considered to be high risk, like many African countries, right, are there. Shipment paid by cash, shipment paid by third parties without an obvious connection to the transaction. So these are the, like you can say, the various issues which we need to take care and about the money laundering, I think. So here FATF plays a very critical role, right? So I think. So this completes your money laundering chapter basically, right? So the chapter 12th basically quite a detailed chapter which I think we need to just, I thought ki maybe like we need to understand and quite a bit. Of course, as I told you, as we discussed basically, directly we may not be like hitting as a forensic auditor, but since it's a part of the overall ecosystem of fraud being committed, and it's at a bigger scale, we need to understand their modus operandi, their what controls are there as an auditor, because it is basically part of the overall fraud ecosystem, right? That is why now like we can't be like just say no, I need not to, I since I'm not involved in an investigation, I have nothing to be bothered basically. No, it cannot be. It's very something very critical where I think the world is now going toward that. So this is what is there. Yes. So now, like if this completes, of course, we have discussed quite a bit about the money laundering. Is something you have still finally. We can just take it up. Otherwise, I can take up the next chapter. Like this is the chapter number 14, basically. Right. Today we don't have any case study. Considering the fraud in the financial statement, ISA 240 is a very important standards which the auditor has to follow internationally with respect to fraud detection. But still anything like is there, I can spend time on discussion over there, anything about the, of course we all discuss quite a bit, so otherwise I can take up this chapter. And if you have something very specific, some observation, some clarification, so I think we can always go with that, right? Something that okay. Okay, I think so. If there's nothing is there, then let us take up the next chapter. I think so. That is the what we are going to take up. Considering fraud in the financial industry, it's a very powerful standard, ISA 240, right? Internationally applicable, like international. This is rolled out by the now, like IFAC is a very famous body, International Federation of Accountant, and all the basically major accounting body in the world are member of this IFAC. Please understand first of all what is IFAC. So International Federation of Accountant, all the major accounting institute across the world are member of this body, is international body, and so they issue the multiple standard which are applied internationally, right? So that is how it is done basically. So like this is the international standard auditing, like ISA 240, which is issued by this IFAC essentially, and where we need to, yeah, I think some Geeta FATF authority to stop extending loan from the World Bank or terror funding country. So, FATF, please understand, Geeta ma'am, it is a basically a advisory body basically. Please understand. They're an advisory body, right? The governments of each country, the regulators of each country is supposed to follow, not duty bound, but they are an advisory body like FAT, like FATF advised to to the banker, like to provide to have in the KYC certain amended form. So they implement that, right? This is advisory body. Now, authority to stop extending loan from the World Bank or the terror funding country. So it is the like the these loan granting body, IMF, World Bank or ADB, like whatever are there, they have to take a call, right? Because FATF issues the advisories. Like you must be seeing, like even this Pakistan, there was a hot discussion. They were part of this since because this terrorist activity, the FATF each time reviews certain like category which they want give it to the Pakistan, and so and the Pakistan as a terrorist state basically, and so the there is so based on the categorization by the FATF, each these like lending institutions, they'll take a call. But FATF do not have a authority basically, right? That we must. They give a like kind of a advisory. They give a very clearly. It is up to them to follow basically. Of course, they follow it, but the FATF do not, because it's a basically a body made of a various like countries are part of this body. So it is basically issue the advisories, right? So that is up to the each lending institution to follow or not. Of course, they should follow it, but they do not have authority to stop. We must understand. So that is how we should understand the role of FATF in the current scenario. Yeah. Okay. So I hope it is clear about the FATF role. Yes. Yes. Okay. Yes, anything else you can always put in chat box. So I'll keep answering because it is a very important things since through this I think study you're really getting a wider scenario of the fraud, because as an auditor, of course you are become a forensic auditor, but your vision should be of a very internationally big, so that you can really be able to see the issues nationally, internationally, and able to like very clearly now perceive the problem. And though of course you may act locally, but your vision should be global basically. That we must understand. So that's why this FATF, I think maybe I will really request you to visit the FATF website, and you will find very interesting things. Please visit the FATF website, and you will find something very interesting, how what activity they are doing, like environmental crime, many other asset crime, many advisory, many guidelines about their standards are loaded over there, which I believe is very important for each one of us, because we really should have a very kind of a broad vision about the various kind of these activities happening. Though we may do only activity at a local level, but our understanding should be, I think, very, very wide and very broad, basically. This is what I believe. That's why this some discussion on the FATF also. So I hope you will study this, go to the site and study that. Okay. Yes. So going further, my dear friend, like just quickly let's take up this chapter. And so this is a very powerful standard which I was saying to you. It is released by the IFAC, and it is essentially talks about the how the in conducting the audits, like very clearly, the auditor is responsible for obtaining reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from the material misstatement. These are all of the auditors. Like any kind of a misstatement or a fraudulent aspect has like remain has not like has clearly been identified, rather than that's something very, very important. So this standard really put a onus on the auditors internationally. So what is the ISA like 240 says very clearly for the auditors? There, the objective of ISA is to identify and assess the risk of financial misstatement of a financial statement due to the fraud. So any metal misstatement, right? What is there in the financial statement? Any kind of metal misstatement? What is the risk because of that? What's the risk essentially, right? To any kind of misstatement, what risks can lead to, basically to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence regarding the assessed risks of metal misstatement due to fraud through designing and implementing appropriate responses. So as an auditor, one is to see the level of assess the risk of a misstatement, like I think. So those who are doing the audit, they must be aware of that. If the any misstatement is very, very material, we need to very clearly see the assess the risk. If the statement is not very, very misstatement, not very material, one can always ignore it. But if certain misstatement, like suppose stock certification, is something very, very wrong, I need to see very clearly see the what kind of a loss it can cause, basically. So I think that is something very clearly. So they need to obtain evidence also as an auditor regarding the assessed risk, because risk of the metal misstatement through very clearly and through designing and implementing the appropriate response. So they need to see the what evidence is there, basically appropriate evidence regarding that risk, basically, and see very clearly the appropriate response to those risks, and to respond appropriately to the fraud or suspected fraud identified during the audit. So whatever misstatement is there, like beside assessing the risk, beside assessing the response, they also suggest, right, or the very clear respond to the fraud or suspected fraud which identified during the audit. So these are objective of the standards, and standard, if they are there, they need to be followed across the board by the whosoever like bodies are there. So they're equally applicable to the in India also. So let's come back to, let's go to the what ISA 240 talks, basically, right? So ISA 240 talks about the, so I think maybe what we can do it now, since I believe it's a long topic, since ISA 240 will not be able to cover today. So maybe 5 minutes are there, maybe I'll just stop it over there, and maybe I think ISA 240 will take next session, I think, because quite a long still, and I won't be able to do justice in making you clear on this point. So we can stop it over there. Still we have 5 minutes. Something you wanted to share or something you wanted to like discuss, I think we can spend the last 5 minutes on some discussion, I think. So I believe many new participant also has joined, I believe. Somewhere new has come, I was seeing in the your group also. So I hope they are comfortable in joining late, and they are able to, there must be, I think, making effort to catch up, I think. So they should be doing it. So because I find many new joinees are there, the late joinees rather, but I think we really welcome them, and I think so if any issues they have, any clarification, they can always ask me in the chat box, and so I will really love to answer our new joinees also over there. or some other issues, you can always address. And
Sir,
yes, sir, please, sir, please.
sir, in very many case studies that we did,
Yeah.
there were reference that the auditor invoked SA 240.
Hmm. Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
whether that is this ISA 240 or some other SA 240 of ICIA AI is there.
Yeah, yeah. Let me tell you. So this is a one is this we are studying as of now. ISA 240 is rolled out by the IFAC,
I
right?
fact. Okay, sir.
Now, what happened based on that? Then each country, like in our country, also CA Institute and other institute, they also roll out their own standard. Like if you see in the audit is also so like SA 240, which you are referring in the book, you are saying is rolled out by the ICI, Institute of Chartered Accountants of
Okay.
India,
Okay, sir. Okay.
right? Because what happens, like these standards are further unless rolled out because the implementers this standard is the owners of this each body. Now CA
ICI in
Institute has
India.
power to punish the auditors, right? IFED cannot punish an Indian auditor, basically, please understand. They roll out, but they can't punish, right? So, but
Okay.
the CAC should punish, but CAC should will have a punishment power over the standard which they rolled out. So, what the CAC does, based on the standard, they roll out their own standard also, right? Okay.
That is SA
And
240.
SA 240. So they roll
Okay,
out
sir.
their standard, which is they just make them cater to the Indians scenario, and which become binding. Like you can see in our country, like we have a INDAS which has rolled out. Now
Yes, sir.
INDAS are the standard which is rolled by the C Institute, which are basically like
IFRS.
essentially they pick up from the IAS International Accounting Standard, again rolled out by the IFAC. So IAS are being rolled out from the long time backs by the IFAC. So the India's in what this the CHU do along with the Minister of Corporate Affairs, they discussed and then slightly fine-tuned them as per the Indian standards working scenario, and then they rolled out the Ind AS, which is now Indian corporate are following. So if the Ind-AS is voided by the corporate, then the Minister of Corporate Affairs can take action, and then
Yes.
and the if Ind-AS is not being followed by the CA, then the CA can be held up by the CA
Yes.
Institute. This how this the standards work
Okay, sir.
in our country and internationally also. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay. Okay.
Yes. Any other thing? Any other point? I think. So these are shell company. Amit, there is a question. Used for availing a IT secret, how it could be stopped? So ITC is also done, Amitji. You are right, I think. As a stopping the concerns, with the government job to stop them. So we and you can't stop because this is also quite a rampant in our country. The shell company are used to avail the IT secret. I totally agree with you. And many like people does it basically. They raise fictitious bill and so many things. They does it all wrong practice. They do. They misuse the law also. I can't go to the each and every detail, but it is this, I think government is working very hard. They have a directorate of intelligence office, like directorate is there specially, which do the data analysis based on the AIs, and they are working quite a bit on such companies, and action is being taken. And the prosecution power is very strong in the GST law. Arrest can be done directly. So, and it is happening. So, but it takes time, I think, because this is a very like severe means in our country. But I'm very sure like the government is aware and government is taking action. You must be seeing the newspaper reports regularly. So, but
Yes,
of
sir.
course, the job of government they are doing, but take time basically. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Any.
Thank you.
So I think thank you very much, sir. I think so for a patient listening. So we'll carry on with the next Saturday, Sunday, most likely, and we'll just take up the topic further onwards. Okay. So thank you very much once again to each one of you, and please take care of yourself and have a wonderful week ahead. I think. Please keep going ahead. Please moving. Please take care of yourself and your families. I think, and thank you very much once again to each one of you, and good night to each one of you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good night, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Just logging off, sir. Please. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.